evening. This is a short truth table. We shall be looking at the short truth table. Firstly, this is an argument. We are using an argument here. This is P implies Q. P therefore Q. You draft out your short table box where you have your first premise, which is P imbibes Q, then second premise, which is P, and third premise, which is Q. Now, the law guiding this theorem states the premises are assumed to be truth while the conclusion assumed to be false. Now we have true, and false. Since we have true and false here, this true, that is why we have true here. You put this true here and this false here. So under conditional statement, this is a conditional sign. True and the false will give you false. But what we have here is true. It shows that our assumption of this argument as a invalid argument is false, because it is proven to us in this first premises that our assumption is incorrect. Therefore, there are an inconsistency in this first premise, making this argument a valid argument. Because there is inconsistency in premise, it makes the argument a valid argument. If there is no inconsistency, the argument, as we assumed invalid, will remain invalid. Secondly, second question, we have premise 1 as V implies O, H implies O. Therefore, V implies H. We sketch out our premise 1, premise 2, and premise 3. And the law guiding this theorem states that the premises are true while the conclusion is false. So here we have our true, and false. True, and false. First of all, you solve your conclusion. In a conditional statement, whenever we have false, for us to get false, it states that the consequence, the antecedent will be true while the consequence will be false. So consequence, antecedent true, and consequence false gives us this false. Therefore, anywhere we see V, we add true. Anywhere we see H, we add false. So here now we have true. What and what should we add to get this true? We can only add true and true, because here is already true. So here cannot be false. If here is false, therefore there will be inconsistency. So we add true. So true and true under conditional statement gives us true. Therefore, this true, we have to put this true under this O here, which is the consequent, as true, because we have assumed here to be true. Therefore, here also will be true. Then under conditional statement, false and the true gives us true under conditional statement. So we're able to solve this without inconsistency. So this argument is invalid because our assumptions are correct. There is no inconsistency in the argument. If you check the conditional, in conditional, T and T gives T, F and T gives T, then T and F give F. So our assumption is correct, therefore this argument is invalid. Third question, we have our first premise as A implies B, C implies D, B implies C, B or C. Therefore, A or D. We sketch out our premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, and conclusion. And the law states premises are true. That's why we have true, and the conclusion false. So for us to get the this false, this is a disjunction. It is a disjunction, and disjunction we only have false whenever we have false and false. That's why we put our disjunct false false. Yes, disjunct false false to get this false. So anywhere we see a, we add false. Anywhere we see d, we add false. Now in this first premise we have false already and we have true. For us to get true in biconditional, if here is false, we will still have true. So we assume here to be true because of here. So when we have false and true, it gives us true. Here we already have false and true. We also assume here to be false because of here this disjunction. So this conditional we have false and false. Under conditional it gives us true. Then this disjunction we already have b as true and c as false. So true and false under disjunction gives us true. Therefore we are able to prove this our assumptions to be correct, making this argument invalid because there is no inconsistency in it. Number 4. Number 4, these are our premises. As you can see, because of our time, let's go straight. We sketch out the premises: premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, and conclusion. So we have truth. You only put the truth or the false in main operators. So here is true, here is true, here is true, and here is false. So for us to get false in conditional, we have true and false to get false. So we add true where we have e and false where we have I. So now we have gotten true and true. For us to get true in this conditional, we cannot have f again because we have gotten t. Therefore this operator in this bracket, which is this sign, the disjunct, must be true, so that true and true will give us true. So for us to get this true, we can assume here true and here true. We can also assume here true and here false, but we take false because of this premise 2. So true and false under disjunction gives us true. Now we have gotten f as true, g as false. We add g here as false. So our conditional statement we already have true. So this false, for us to get true, it will be true or false. But we go with false because of this sign, and we already have false here. Here cannot be true, because if here is true and here is true, here will be true. But because of here is false, therefore we go with false. So false and false under conditional gives us true. Then true and false under a conjunction, this is a conjunction sign, give us false. So negation of this truth, that is when we have false. We are able to solve this without any inconsistency, without proving our assumptions incorrect. So we prove our assumptions correct, that this statement is invalid. Therefore this statement is invalid because there is no inconsistency. Then looking at this, see our first premise and our conclusion. So we sketch it out: first premise and conclusion. We have true and we have false. So true on premises, false on conclusion, as we assumed it. So since we have true here and we have false here, for us to get this false in biconjunction, we must have true and false. So we have true here and we have false here. This is true, negation of it is false. So true and false gives us false. Now since you have gotten true and is a negation, this operator here, this operator showing a conjunction must be false, because that is what we negate to get t. So here that is false now, true and true, because this p already, you have a p as true, which is what we stated here, and this imbibes as true. So for us to get this imbibe which is true, this conjunction must be true. So true and true gives us true, and for us to get true here, here and here must be true, which is t and t. So this q is t and this t is, this r is t. That is how we get this true and true. And here true and true supposed to be true, but we have false. That means this argument is valid because we are unable to prove our assumption to be correct. That means there is inconsistency in this place. There is inconsistency, making the argument to be valid. So at this junction, we will stop for our next class. Thank you, fans. Feel free to drop your comments, ask your questions, and it will be attended to. Thank you.